at the spring skies in the northern hemisphere and summer in the south, looking at Leo in the north and Vela in the south. And then we go to the moon, reliving the story of manned spaceflight from Yuri Gagarin's first orbit of the Earth to the Americans' first landing on the moon. All in Encyclopedia Galactica. Late March, our planet is approaching an equinox. At this point in Earth's annual circuit of the sun, it's spring in the northern hemisphere and autumn in the south. From this seasonal perspective, we're looking out from our own galaxy to those that lie beyond. The world over, our heavenly vista is of the same duration. For at the equinox, day and night are equal. We look towards the constellation of Virgo and a galactic jet. And in another direction, the enigma of Eta Carina, a prospective supernova. Objects in the sky are identified by number. This is M100, Messier 100, or in the new general catalogue, NGC 4321. In the late 18th century, it was the French astronomer Charles Messier, a comet hunter, who first catalogued by number. Messier 1 was the Crab Nebula. Messier 31, M31, the great galaxy of Andromeda. M42, the Orion Nebula. 110 fuzzy objects have a Messier number. Armed with our catalogue, we explore the spring sky. We're in the north, looking north. The constellations from the mid-latitudes. Top right in Draco, the star Thuban. Thuban was the pole star of the ancient Egyptians. Today, Polaris is the pole star. In the future, this will be the pole star, brilliant Vega. Over millennia, the pole of the sky shifts roughly within this circle. From Polaris today, the axis of the Earth will tilt to point at Vega. It's caused by a 26,000-year wobble in the spin of the globe. Towards the horizon, in the constellation of Perseus, the demon star Algol. Algol appears to wink every couple of days. That's because it's an eclipsing binary, dull when one star is in front of the other, bright when they separate. Still in Perseus, it was here in 1901 that a star exploded, a nova. This was the culprit, a binary, the smaller partner feeding on material from the larger. The result, chronic indigestion and a nuclear convulsion. After another build-up, there'll be another nova. Unlike a supernova, which is once and for all. The northern sky looking south. Leo the lion. Boötes the herdsman. Corona Borealis, the northern crown. Libra the scales. Corvus the crow. Hydra the water snake. And Virgo the virgin. In Leo, the cross beneath the lion's head is a radiant from which meteors appear, but only in November. It's then that the orbit of Earth passes through a trail of debris left by a comet. The result is a shower of meteors. In Leo's case, they're called the Leonids, but it'll be 1999 before the next really big display. The whole region of Leo and Virgo abounds with galaxies, thousands of them, misty blurs in small telescopes. This one, M87, is a gigantic sphere, probably an amalgamation of several ancient galaxies. Through the Hubble Space Telescope, a great jet emanates from the galactic center. In animation now, it's surmised that the jet is being shot from a huge black hole. At the same time, material is spinning into this ultimate gravitational trap. M87 lies between Leo and Virgo and is good in binoculars. So too, further down, is another bright galaxy. M104, the Sombrero. Here, through a big telescope, a band of dust girdles the equatorial plane. From Virgo, still lower in the sky, to Corvus. This is the home of the Ringtail Galaxy. In fact, two galaxies in collision. Their gravitational interaction has strewn great chains of stars across the cosmos. The sights of spring in the north. Now, from the southern hemisphere looking north, the constellations of autumn. They're largely the inverse patterns of the north. Bottom right, in Boötes, the great star Arcturus. A giant, 25 times the diameter of the Sun, the fourth brightest star in the sky, and 37 light-years from Earth. With the Milky Way straddling the sky, we're now looking south in autumn. The constellations from the southern hemisphere. Top center, in the constellation of Carina, the great nebula of Eta Carina. It's just visible to the naked eye in a dazzling part of the Milky Way. At the very heart of the nebula, the most brilliant star is Eta Carina itself. Last century, Eta Carina was one of the brightest stars. Today, it seems to be hidden behind a shell of dust. Astronomers think this is a precursor to a supernova, the explosive death of a stellar giant. Down to the painter's easel and Beta Pictoris. An interesting star with a disk of dust, here in red and yellow. The star is bright enough for binoculars. Towards the center now, and to the biggest of our two satellite galaxies, the Large Magellanic Cloud. Shaped like a bar, it's a mini-galaxy with just 1/10 the star population of the Milky Way. In the left-hand side of the cloud is the Tarantula Nebula, bright enough for the unaided eye. To the right of the nebula, a star blew up and died in 1987, the closest supernova in 300 years. Before it went bang, it puffed out a ring, a picture from Hubble. And this remarkable shot, following the explosion. Concentric rings of light racing through space from the seat of the cataclysm. Upwards now to Crux, the Southern Cross. Here is the Jewel Box, a cluster of brilliant young supergiants. Finally, down a little from the Jewel Box. This is the Coal Sack, not a hole in space, but the best-known dark nebula, and visible by naked eye. A brief tour of the heavens, a guide which has only hinted at the enjoyment to be had through telescope, binoculars, and by just looking at the sky. Stay with us, as after the break, we go to the moon. The story of spaceflight from Sputnik to the Apollo lunar missions.
Be a two-car family with a 16-valve Nissan Primera.
Once upon a time, the diesel car was an unfortunate beast. Slow, noisy, smelly, and smoky. But the diesel has changed, and so has our diesel fuel. SO Diesel 2000 is a brand new diesel fuel that helps cut exhaust smoke, reduces noise, gives better fuel economy, improves performance, and helps make diesels of every generation cleaner, healthier creatures. SO Diesel 2000, a new generation of diesel.
Gather round, ladies and gentlemen, I'm in the iron and steel business. Wife does the ironing, I do the steeling.
Look it. Hellos, no problem with Slaphead. Slaphead's new formulation.
Each day you invite the most powerful salesman in the world into your living room.
This is me before Hunkomatic. And this is me 2 weeks later.
How do you know whether they're real or bogus? Well, they have to stick to our rules if they want to advertise on television. We're here to ITC you aren't misled.
Discovery always brings you the finest documentary programs from around the world. And now we introduce our own teletext service designed to provide Discovery program information and interesting features. Available in 5 languages throughout Europe to viewers with teletext televisions. As a special introduction to Discovery Text, we're offering a luxury cruise with Discovery Cruises to the winner of our competition. The questions are in our new teletext pages. See page 100 for details. Discovery Text.
The world, the people, the machines that make the future world, the real world, fantastic, reality, the future, the present, the future, the present, ingenuity, the people, science in the real world, on Discovery every week. Equinox, Thursdays at 9, Sundays at 6.
The shape of things to come.
Terminate automatic.
An orbiting space station the size of a city, with a shuttle service to Earth.
Visual 8128.78.
0 minus 1 hour and 15 minutes and holding. A vision of the foreseeable future when space exploration will have become space exploitation. This Russian dreamed of such things. Born a century before the Soviets launched the first artificial satellite, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, father of rocketry mathematics. The American physicist Robert Goddard put theory into practice. He experimented with homemade rockets. some thought him mad. But Goddard knew that only a liquid-fueled rocket carrying oxygen could work in the vacuum of space. He launched the prototype for a new age. It was the Germans in World War II who developed the rocket. They built powerful missiles to hit cities like London. The triumph of launching the space age fell to the Soviets. From a secret firing in Kazakhstan, a Vostok rocket thrust towards Earth orbit. There it delivered a tiny Sputnik. The world had its first man-made satellite, the date October the 4th, 1957. Two months later came a Sputnik, 6 times as heavy, aboard the first space traveler, a dog called Laika. The Americans countered with a Flopnik, a disaster that had them in search of a new designer. Meanwhile, in the strictest secrecy, this capsule was being prepared by Soviet technicians to carry the first man into space. It would sit on a mighty new Vostok rocket. But who would sit in the capsule? The Soviet Union's first cosmonaut would be selected from this group of service personnel, and his aptitude would be tested to breaking point. The man to emerge was a test pilot, Air Force Lieutenant Yuri Gagarin. It was 1961, height of the Cold War. As the gigantic Vostok launcher was assembled, the Soviets were banking on another propaganda victory. The race for space had become East versus West. Gagarin couldn't have been cooler. But at the launch site, preparations were frantic. The Americans had already announced an attempt for May. With a month in hand, the first man in space had to be Soviet. Thus, on April the 12th, 1961, Yuri Gagarin set forth. If he failed, the world might never know, for the media blackout was total. Do svidaniya from Sergei Korolyov, the Soviets' brilliant space chief. Four strap-on boosters and 33 engines carried Vostok aloft. The objective was one Earth orbit. Gagarin's capsule was in the nose cone, a P to be shot into orbit as the boosters and rocket fell away. Gagarin was in space. The world marveled. 23 days later, the Americans responded. A puny Redstone rocket lobbed Alan Shepard into a 15-minute suborbital hop. Stung by the Soviet lead, President Kennedy announced that America would have a man on the moon before the end of the 60s. The Soviets answered with the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova. But by now, the Americans were also seasoned orbiters. In 1963, this was the last splashdown of their Mercury program. Next, they announced, would be the two-man Gemini series, replacing solo missions. Again, the Soviets got in ahead. They crammed 3 men into a capsule built for 2. So cramped, they flew without spacesuits or ejector seats. A few months later, just days ahead of the first Gemini, Alexei Leonov became the first cosmonaut to walk in space. It was 1965. The Soviets had done it again. With Gemini, America was to shrug off Soviet triumphs and concentrate on getting a man to the moon. This meant testing equipment, training astronauts, and maneuvering in orbit. Vital work, for rendezvousing and docking in particular, would be the key to a successful lunar landing. On Gemini 4, Ed White had become the first American to walk in space. An astronaut's view as Gemini leaves orbit for Earth. The flashes are atmospheric friction against the craft. The Gemini program ended in 1966, the bridge between the tentative steps of Mercury and the great adventure of Apollo. Three years later, a Saturn rocket headed for the moon. This was Apollo 11. 3 days later, its flimsy lander module, Eagle, was dropping towards the unknown.
Forward. 40 feet down, 2.5.
Aboard, astronauts Armstrong and Aldrin.
4 forward, drift into the right a little. Good. Okay. Contact light. Okay, engine stop.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Kennedy's pledge was fulfilled.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
It was July the 20th, 1969, and the decade still had 5 months to run. They'd made it.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And mankind could watch on television. Live pictures were transmitted to Earth. In case a quick getaway was necessary, Armstrong collected contingency samples. But all was well at Tranquility Base. The astronauts spent 2.5 hours outside the lander. They set up instruments and gathered 20 kilos of moon rock. After 21 hours, 36 minutes, Eagle ascended towards the orbiting command module. There'd be more missions. What few people knew was that the Soviets had been simultaneously trying to land. Next time in Encyclopedia Galactica, we go riding the shuttle, the cornerstone of NASA's activities after the money ran out for Apollo. The American strategy of reusable spacecraft compared to the European satellite launches and the Russian space station Mir. And we look into the future, the plans for a new super shuttle, a return to the moon, to Mars, and beyond. Next time in Encyclopedia Galactica.